I'm joined once again by Katrine Sporle, who is the Property Ombudsman, or often referred to as TPO. I just hope we could kind of bat a few ideas together about regulation and the future of regulation.
Okay.
It seems to me that we live in a world where compliance is like a whole new industry. But the property industry as a sector is very complicated, and it does affect individuals' lives to a huge extent, both emotionally and financially. But it seems there hasn't been a lot of regulation, and now there's quite a bit.
Well, not yet, but almost. It's coming. Yeah. I think that this is the first sector I've ever worked in where they've actually asked for regulation. And I think, in fairness to government, they are listening. The issue then is how much regulation, for what, and who's going to pay for it. And you know, far be it from me to say the Brexit word, but I think that has slowed things down.
Because people have been looking in a different direction.
Yeah. But I think regulation is coming. There is currently a regulation of property agents working party. That's being chaired by Lord Best. Mm-hmm. I know Lord Best because he used to be chair of TPO at one time, right. And he is an independent person in the House of Lords. What he's looking at is how to regulate estate agents, letting agents, and residential leasehold managing agents. Okay. So those are the people that actually run blocks of flats on behalf of freeholders. And
it's about time too, isn't it?
Oh, I think so. Yes, I think so.
Amazing. It hasn't been more regulated in the past.
I think that's right. And I think, you know, what I would say to you is that the Property Ombudsman's Codes of Practice have been about self-regulation.
Yeah.
And that's great. And we are very proud to say that we have got about 40,000 agents signed up to self-regulate against good practice. But that's not everybody. And the problem with it is that it's all very well to have regulation, but you use the word compliance, and with compliance goes enforcement. And the fact is, it's a natural human thing. If there's no compliance or enforcement, then people will get away with what they can get away with.
Yeah.
So the regulatory framework has to have everything. It has to have clear rules. Everybody should be involved, and then it should also include enforcement. So Lord Best is going to do his best to bring forward recommendations on that in July, but that still leaves the gaps. So there are big gaps. So TPO is there for residential agents, but if you've bought a new house, there's no ombudsman and there's no redress. And if you rent directly from a landlord, there's no ombudsman, there's no redress. And I think those are two big gaps that must be filled.
Okay. It's interesting that it's the industry that asked for regulation, because if you, the other way, different industries in different parts of the world they have regulation forced on them that they then don't like. Well, actually, it's great that the property industry, generally speaking, has got hold of this and gone, actually, we need this. This is good for everybody.
I tell you, actually, I went to an ALA conference, I think it was, a couple of years ago, and a minister came and gave a speech and stayed long enough to take questions and answers. And at the end of it, the guy that was facilitating asked the delegates if they were in favour of regulation, and everybody in the room put their hands up. You know, I mean, it says it all, really.
What about housing policy at government level? I've recently made a series of programmes looking at British history and through houses. And at different points in time, we used properties to tell a story about what was happening in society and government and politically. And when I got to the end, it really dawned on me that over the last 1,000 years, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but the same topics keep coming up. Every generation, every 50 years, the same topics come up. cost of housing, amount of housing, quality of housing, tax of housing, numbers of housing, position of housing. And it just seems to me that we've got ourselves as a nation, as a society, in a bit of a pickle at the moment. We are in crisis. It's my own personal opinion, but do you think there is the remotest possibility that housing could be removed from the political agenda, and therefore we could have a kind of independent and very long-term policy to pull us out of where we are currently? They did it to interest rates, and they do it with big national infrastructure projects. Do you think it could be done for housing?
No. This is personal opinion, but from my experience, I've spent a lot of time in the public sector, particularly on planning. And I think the same things were said about planning 20 years ago. Take it out of the political arena and set up a kind of Ofwat. And I think that planning and housing are too close to the hearts and minds of politicians for them ever to be removed. I think what really is needed is a strategic approach. I completely agree with you. And I think, again, personally, having been a local authority chief executive and been chief planning inspector, the problem came when we stopped building council houses. And I say council houses, that shows how old I am. Social housing is the key. And if we had social housing to the same standards that we used to have, go back to Parker Morris standards, I'm that old, the fact is, I think some of our issues would go away. I remember I negotiated the purchase of a flat with a flatmate when I was 18 years old, because you could. And because, you know, I had no worries about going in and negotiating something. My 18-year-old wouldn't know where to start, and actually wouldn't even expect to be able to start, because they would think from the word go that the housing market is not for them. So some of our work that we deal with complaints comes from the fact that actually people are not buying houses anything like as often as we used to. So therefore they don't know how to do it.
But is that because there's a shift in attitude in British society, or in terms of actually renting's great and long-term renting's a good option? I think historically in this country it's been Englishman's home is his castle, and we have a very much a kind of psyche of buying a property.
I think there are two things. I think that brilliantly there's no longer a stigma about renting, because actually it gives you flexibility. It means you don't have to make life choices and settle down too early. It's great, and there's lots of choice. I think then the issue is, well, when am I going to get on the housing ladder, and am I going to be precluded from it? So there's a whole issue here that I'm not in a position to answer, but it's about the economic well-being of an awful lot of people, and then what they're told to expect.
You talked about the lack of council housing and affordable housing, and making that programme, the series that I did looking at British history. One of the things we look back was Margaret Thatcher's right to buy, which at the time everybody thought was brilliant. I mean, it was brilliant. It gave a whole generation mobility and money and a home, and that was terrific. Actually, you look back and go, that was a disaster, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Haven't got any council housing left. We've sold it all away.
Well, and that was because the housing wasn't replaced.
Yeah.
It should have been replaced, and actually
you could see the curve. We had short-term housing policies by governments who either wanted to get in power or stay in power, and that's what I keep coming back to. So we had a policy that benefited everybody, but it was there for 25, 30 years. We need something. Something's got to change.
Something's got to change. I think one of the scandals of the day is how it happened that nobody was looking, and freehold suddenly got overtaken by leasehold on new housing estates. How did that happen?
I don't know. And today's government say that it's stopped. Well, it clearly hasn't stopped. And they talk about it. There should be no more leasehold houses. There's nothing wrong with leasehold flats. Great. Perfect. But a leasehold house shouldn't exist. You're right. How did it come about? Yeah. And why is it still happening, even when all political parties are saying it should stop? Stop it now. Well, stop it now. Stop it tomorrow.
Absolutely. Bring in a private member's bill. Yeah. Stop it.
Everybody wants to do it. I don't see where the issue is. Poor form.
It is poor
Maybe
form.
I shall ring the TPO.